So we have understood the ideology that was Nazism. And we also saw the story of the leader behind this ideology, Adolf Hitler. Now the question might come to your mind that the ideology existed and so did a persuasive leader behind it. But what really were the reasons why this particular ideology rose up in Germany and gained prominence? That is exactly what we will be discussing in this particular lesson, and therefore let us dive deeper into the various causes for the rise of Nazism. The first cause behind the rise of Nazism deals with the Treaty of Versailles. Now, do you remember this particular treaty? This treaty ended the First World War and made peace after the war. But the Treaty of Versailles had many particular terms which caused widespread dissatisfaction and discontent with this particular treaty among the German public. So before we move on to understand what this discontent was, let us look at the various important terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Starting off, and the most important perhaps, is that the Treaty of Versailles imposed the entire blame of war on German shoulders, or it said that Germany has to accept full responsibility for the war, all the damages caused by it, and all the deaths it caused. Moving on, it also put a drastic armed limitation on Germany, especially on its military. So what we see is that by the Treaty of Versailles, Germany was forbidden to possess tanks, warplanes or heavy artillery. All these possessions which was helping Germany have a greater traction in the First World War, Germany was no longer allowed to keep. But even more importantly perhaps was that Germany got a 1/10 reduction of its army, and Germany could now only have an army of just about 100,000 men, and also in its navy it could only have 6 battleships. So as I mentioned, this was a 1/10 reduction of the original German army during the First World War. There were also reparations which were to be paid. Reparations are war damages. So the vanquished or a losing country in the war has to pay to the victorious nations to make up for all the damages it has caused in that particular war. So in the First World War's case, a Treaty of Versailles put a huge war indemnity or reparation on German shoulders, which was amounting to about 6.6 billion, which itself was an insane amount. Germany also had to part away with crucial and key territories it possessed. And altogether, Germany lost about 13% of their total landholding in Europe, which included 15% of their farming land and 10% of the industries which Germany possessed. Along with this, Germany also had to part away with all of its colonial possessions in various other places such as Africa and South Asia. Now, in total, apart from the loss of land, Germany also had to face a loss of population, loss of its own people. And Germany lost about 6 million of its own German population, who now had to live in foreign lands as these lands were handed over to other countries. Now, the majority of the German population, which also happened to include Hitler, they were dissatisfied with the Treaty of Versailles and its various imposing and humiliating terms. You see, they considered the treaty to be a diktat. This is because Germany was not given any other option, and all these terms were put on the German shoulders. As you can see in this satirical illustration, that the Allied nations are forcing the peace terms onto Germany, and these allied nations are holding Germany in their grasp and making the Germany open up its mouth so they can force feed the peace terms, and they are saying you have got to swallow it whether you like it or not. Therefore, peace terms that's supposed to be peaceful in nature are rather being given in an impository manner, which is why the Germans gave the title of a diktat or an imposition onto the Treaty of Versailles. Now, if you remember, after the First World War, the Emperor of Germany fled to Holland. This brought about a change of leadership and government in Germany. After the First World War, a new government by the name of the Weimar Republic replaced the erstwhile monarchy of the German Empire. Now, this republic, the Weimar Republic, was forced to sign the Treaty of Versailles as it had no other option either to sign the treaty or have war declared on it again. And therefore, the newly formed Weimar Republic had to sign the Treaty of Versailles. Now, can you answer this question? Germans call the Treaty of Versailles as dash. Did they call it a directive, a diktat, an edict, or a decree? The correct answer is a diktat. Now, the newly formed Weimar Republic government had to sign the Treaty of Versailles, but this decision earned them unpopularity back home, as the German public now considered the new government as criminals for having even signed this particular treaty and have had brought such humiliation and devastation on Germany. And they thus called the new government as criminals and also blamed them for the defeat in the First World War. This is because after the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, many rumors came up which further said that the government, the newly formed government, was actually behind the cause of the German defeat in the war so that they can now be the new leaders of Germany. Now, in this environment of dissatisfaction with the Treaty of Versailles, Hitler and his Nazi party found an opportunity. They made their stance particularly anti-Versailles and openly voiced criticism against the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, which made the German public believe that Hitler's Nazi party can truly bring back Germany's lost glory. Now, while the Nazi party rose up in popularity with its anti-Versailles stance, the government was not able to do anything about this dissatisfaction which the Nazi party was cashing upon. In fact, the inefficiency of the government to handle the dissatisfaction and any other public grievance further complicated the political environment. And this will bring us to the next point and the next important cause for the rise of Nazism in Germany. The political instability of Germany was itself an important cause for the rise of Nazism as a political ideology and an alternative to the current structure after the First World War. So, as mentioned, the Weimar Republic inherited the German state from the erstwhile German Empire, and it had to sign the Treaty of Versailles to make peace with the Allied nations. This, however, made the Weimar Republic incredibly unpopular. And this was the first act taken by the government. And as you can understand, first impressions matter. You see, the Weimar Republic already was dealing with certain amount of cohesion or resistance in the German public. This is because democracy was a new concept in Germany. In fact, Germany emerged as a nation only 50 years prior to the end of the war, and therefore the introduction of democracy to this newly formed nation itself was too much for the people to understand, and frankly it did not get the respect that democracy received elsewhere. This is because Germany, since its very beginning, had been a couple of independent states of Germanic people who were warring and had militant tendencies. Therefore, the people always had a constant admiration for army and armed strength. And often the German army, after the formation of the German nation, got more independence of action than other sources of power. This is why Germany had been described as a militant state. Now, what happened after the Treaty of Versailles was signed? That is correct. The German army was reduced in capacity and its power snatched away. And this, as you understand, was an attack directly on the pride of Germany. As you can understand, the concept of pride of Germany was an outlet of aggressive nationalism which they had, as they could not possibly believe that their army could have been reduced in capacity and power. Now, in this environment, many rumors came up that the Weimar Republic actually had an active hand in this particular situation where the German army had its power taken away. Many rumors came up that it was actually the Weimar Republic and the Democrats who currently made up the Weimar Republic, who had sided with the Allies during war, betrayed the German army just so that they can get power in a new German state which is independent of army interference. Therefore, the people believed that the Weimar Republic is made of traitors and decided to put the blame of the defeat in war on the Weimar Republic. And therefore, much anti-democratic propaganda was also released, which along with the many rumors aggravated the public. Again, this is an extension of aggressive nationalism, as the public refused to believe that their mighty and proud army can ever be defeated, and therefore they were finding ways to put that blame on someone else, which in this case was the inefficient government which inherited the German state. However, more important in this context, as you can see through the many protests against the Weimar Republic, what really was happening at this point is even before the Weimar Republic could establish itself as the legitimate political successor of Germany, the people already had lost trust on this government, and there was now an immense gap between the government and the people. Now, this is not to say that the Weimar Republic was flawless. The Republic could have made enough strides to bridge the gap between themselves and the people, but instead their actions and policies did the otherwise. The Weimar Constitution, which came up after the First World War, introduced parliamentary system in Germany. But however, this parliamentary system was unique, as no majorities were allowed in this particular parliament. Now, how does that work? The reason behind this particular no majority parliament was to ensure that one party rule does not exist in the parliament, and no one can have enough majorities to eventually become a totalitarian dictator. Now, while this particular concept seems idealistic on paper, in reality it was rather counterproductive. Since there were no majorities in the parliament and therefore no majority party, there was no agreement in the parliament. There was no majority or leading party to really lead the parliament in a particular direction. Thus, what happened is that there was no check of power in the parliament, as in reality there really was no power in the German parliament. Now, majority of the Democrats who made up the political parties and filled up the Weimar parliament and also the government actually had no political experience or were politically inexperienced in democracy, as they had no exposure to it, and therefore leading a democratic parliament was something they were rather inefficient at. And that is why the German chancellor, which was the executive head, actually held most of the authority, as this inexperienced parliament could not be left with making real decisions. The people of Germany were not happy with this system. They found this political inexperience and also the inefficiency of this particular system to deal with many consequences and crises after the First World War as not a good alternative. And this led the people of Germany to lose faith in democracy itself, which made them look for other alternatives. So what we understand is that the people of Germany started to look for a strong government. A government which argues less and does more. A government which has a strong hand to deal with issues. A strong voice to truly voice the discontent of the people of Germany. And a strong plan to truly map out what is the best for a German future. In essence, the people of Germany wanted a strong government. A government that truly represents Germany. So you can understand that the German public were associating the concept of strength with efficiency and power wielding, which is again an extension of their militant nature and how they thought that true strength and true power lies in military strength, and true efficiency is associated with this concept. This is where Hitler and his Nazi party comes in. Now, Hitler decided to take advantage of the political instability created by the contemporary government and also be the answer for the public's search for a strong alternative. Hitler therefore created the idea of the Nazi party to be one that is strong. Hitler made sure that the Nazi party had real strength or its own private military force to back it up. He also made sure that the Nazi Party voices its opinion to truly showcase the discontent of the German public. He also, through his various policies, showed the people of Germany that he truly has a plan for its future. And he also showed that the entire party is rather an extension of himself, and the party is centered around and on his capable shoulders. And that is how Hitler was able to create exactly what the people of Germany were looking for in this time of political instability, which led to the rise of Nazism in Germany. Now, speaking of the consequences of the Treaty of Versailles on Germany, let us speak about another cause behind the rise of Nazism, which is associated with the Treaty of Versailles, the economic collapse that Germany had to face. So, if you remember, the Treaty of Versailles imposed an insane amount of war indemnity on German shoulders. Now, Germany had fought on both fronts of the First World War, and therefore it had encountered a huge amount of devastation. Any hopes of reconstruction after the First World War went down the drain when this particular indemnity on Germany was imposed, which made up for a significant chunk of its revenue. Now, along with the devastation of the war, Germany also had to part away with several of its key territories, which it had to cede to newly formed countries like Poland, Lithuania, Czechoslovakia, and also to other nations like Denmark and France and Belgium. And along with this, Germany also had to lose several resource-rich areas, such as the Saar Basin, which became a league mandate, or it was administered by the League of Nations, and the resources or the right to collect or gather resources from this region was given to France. Therefore, Germany was devastated by the war. It was pressured to pay an insane amount of war indemnity. It had lost critical and strategic territories and therefore had no ways to pay their war indemnity. In essence, Germany faced what many economists call the condition of economic anemia. Now, anemia is the medical condition when your body cannot pump enough oxygen in the lack or absence of red blood cells. Similarly, economic anemia is a condition when a country cannot create or produce enough resources in the lack of economic means. Now, since Germany was undergoing this economic anemia in the interwar period, it had drastic results on the life of the public as well. The German youth who had fought and encountered the First World War, who had seen their friends and family die in it, now, after the war is over, instead of being able to put all that behind, now had to come back home to face unemployment. Along with this, there was also a rampant food crisis, which left most of Germany in a hungry condition. So what you can say is that unemployed, hungry, and in total angry over the current situation, where do you think the youth of the country went? The youth of the country went to the Nazi Party. The Nazi Party offered them fair and minimum wage and also a uniform and a purpose to fight for the country, which they took immense pride in. And therefore, the unemployment and hunger was the regular for the German youth. And in this picture, you can see that people during this condition are begging for jobs. So in this condition, the only economic and only employment avenue which the youth found was the Nazi Party. And therefore, they took refuge in the Nazi Party, which added to the numbers of the Nazi Party. The Nazi Party, therefore, since its inception, was primarily composed of young people. Let us see how the government of Germany at this time, the Weimar Republic, was handling this economic anemic condition. So, what happens when you don't have enough money to make payments, but you do need to do it at that very moment? You borrow, right? Germany or the Weimar Republic did a similar thing, but it borrowed recklessly. And this reckless borrowing from other countries pushed Germany into debt, into a condition where it owed a lot of money to a lot of other nations. Now, what did this lead to? So you see, this reckless borrowing put Germany into debt as mentioned. Now, how did Germany try to respond to this debt situation? Well, what Germany did and most other nations do in a debt condition is that they devalue their currency. Now, devaluation of currency is a tricky economic concept, but let us understand in a simple manner. What devaluation truly stands for is decreasing the value of a country's currency. So let us say a government has to make payments to another country because it's in debt, but the government does not have enough amount of money. What the government can do is reduce the value of the currency, or in simple terms, reduce how much that currency can purchase. Let us take, for example, previously 100 rupees could buy two apples, but after devaluation, 100 rupees could only buy one apple. So, what is happening over here is by reducing the value or the purchasing capacity of a particular currency, the load on a country is being lowered because, in essence, the country has to pay less. That is what Germany thought of doing while devaluing its currency. But devaluing happens to be a slippery slope because excessive devaluation could lead to economic crisis. And that's exactly what happened to Germany. So what happens when a country excessively devalues its currency is that the currency then loses its overall value. Its overall strength depletes and the currency no longer has any strength of its own. So excessive devaluation then leads to a condition where the prices of every other good becomes way too high. The prices shoot up in the sky, and that condition is known as hyperinflation. And that is what happened in Germany after it tried to devalue its currency in an excessive manner. There was a situation of hyperinflation when the cost of commodities went to an astronomical proportion. Why does this happen? This is because while the value of goods are based on demand, which is constantly increasing, therefore the price of goods keep on increasing, while the value of currency is based on the debt of a government, and to lower the debt, the value of the currency keeps on decreasing, and therefore the gap between the value of commodities and the value of the currency keeps on expanding, and therefore this hyperinflation occurs. Do you want to see an example of exactly how severe this hyperinflation was in interwar Germany? Let us take this case for example. In 1918, at the time of the end of the First World War, a piece or a loaf of bread costed 0.5 marks in Germany, marks being the German currency. So in the year 1918, bread was costing only 0.5 marks. But by the end of 1923, which only is 4 years is the last comparison, the price of the same loaf of bread had increased to 201 billion marks. That is an astronomical difference. This is, in simple terms, hyperinflation at work. So can you understand the difference? That is why this is hyperinflation. Therefore, there was unemployment in the country, there was a food crisis, and the prices of things had gone up an astronomical proportion. Already, the air of an economic crisis was brewing, but there still was attempts at recovery after this situation. But all those efforts and attempts went down in vain when the year 1929 came up. This is because in the year 1929, the economy of the entire world shattered because of the economic crash of the US economy, which was the superpower at this time. So since the US economy crashed, USA had to take back all the loans it had made to Germany. Now, Germany's reconstruction and all future hopes were based on these American loans. And now that it had to give them back, Germany was simply left with no money. This is known as the 1929 crisis or the Great Depression of 1929, which while affected many countries across Europe and the world, it in essence shattered the economy of Germany altogether. And therefore, the economy of Germany at this point was almost at a beyond repair condition. And the people of Germany had now suffered enough misery to understand that the Weimar Republic could not bring them out of this crisis, and they need an alternative to put a capable person at the helm of this sinking ship before Germany goes down for good. Therefore, the people desperately needed a way out of this crisis. And the Nazi party under Hitler modeled itself to be exactly the answer to this situation. The Nazi Party appealed to the masses of Germany because it had combined the concepts and the economic benefits of socialism, of national unity, which is putting the country together. It had promised immense prosperity through its policies and plans, and also had offered every German full employment, everything the people wanted. So Hitler and the Nazi Party was like a dream come true for the Germans in this hour of need. And that's exactly what the people did by supporting Hitler in the hopes of getting all these benefits, which led to the rise of Nazism even further. So in this lesson, we started our understanding of what were all the reasons and all the causes behind the rise of Nazism in Germany, where we focused upon the public discontentment surrounding the Treaty of Versailles, then the political instability that ensued in Germany, and finally the entire economic collapse that took place in Germany, and how the Nazi Party rushed in to respond and to be the answer and the solution to all these problems, therefore making their position concrete in the hearts and minds of the German public. In the subsequent lesson, we will continue with our discussion on the other causes behind the rise of Nazism in Germany. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers, or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it is rewarding too. So register for free now.